Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the cold metal chair and watched the alien council members talk about humans like they were farm animals. The tall, crystal-like Zephyrians glowed with soft blue light as they spoke. Their voices sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The Deathworlders are useful for dangerous work," said Council Leader Zix-9. "But they lack the intelligence for important decisions. We should keep them in the mining worlds where they belong." Sarah's hands stayed folded in her lap. She had learned not to show anger during these meetings. For 50 years, humans had been trying to prove they deserved respect. For 50 years, the galaxy had treated them like smart animals. The Valdorians made wet gurgling sounds that meant laughter. These fish-like beings lived in beautiful water worlds where nothing bad ever happened. Their ambassador, Glubmore, spoke through a water-filled helmet. "The humans from Earth are so violent," Glubmore said. "They come from a world of storms, earthquakes, and predators. How can such creatures understand peace and wisdom?" Sarah remembered her grandmother's stories about the old wars on Earth, about how humans had learned to stop fighting each other and work together. But the aliens never wanted to hear those stories. The insect-like Chitauri clicked their mandibles together. Ambassador Clickvack's black eyes stared at Sarah with cold interest. "Deathworlders are perfect workers," Clickvack said. "Strong, tough, and easy to replace when they break. We should use more of them in the outer colonies." Sarah thought about the human colonies scattered across the galaxy. Families working in dangerous mines, building homes on hostile worlds, always doing the jobs that other species found too risky. The aliens called it efficient resource allocation. Humans called it survival. "Ambassador Chen," Zix-9's voice cut through her thoughts. "Your people have requested better safety equipment for the mining operations on Kepler 442b. This request is denied. The cost is too high for expendable workers." Expendable workers. Sarah had heard those words 1,000 times. Each time they cut a little deeper. "Council Leader," Sarah said carefully. 12 humans died in the mine collapse last week. Better equipment could prevent future accidents." The Zephyrian's light dimmed with annoyance. "Accidents happen. Your people reproduce quickly enough to replace the losses. This discussion is finished." Sarah wanted to stand up and scream. She wanted to tell them that each of those 12 humans had families, dreams, children who would grow up without parents. Instead, she nodded and made notes on her tablet. Far away on Kepler 442b, Dr. Marcus Webb crawled through the collapsed mine tunnel with his medical scanner. The air was thick with dust and the smell of death. Emergency lights cast scary shadows on the broken walls. "Found another one," called out Miner Tom Harrison. His voice was rough from breathing the poisoned air. Marcus moved toward the sound. The body was crushed under fallen rocks. The man's name tag read, "Pete Nguyen, father of 3. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, then activated his scanner to record the death for his report. "Doc," Tom said quietly, "this is the 4th collapse this month. The aliens know these tunnels aren't safe. They just don't care." Marcus had been studying alien biology for 20 years. He knew things about the galactic species that would surprise them. Every race in the galaxy had evolved on easy worlds. The Zephyrians came from a planet with light gravity and no weather. The Valdorians lived in calm oceans with no predators. The Chitauri developed on worlds where food was everywhere and danger was rare. Only Earth was different. Only Earth had ice ages that killed most life every few thousand years. Only Earth had supervolcanoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, diseases that jumped between species, and predators that hunted in packs. Other worlds were like gardens. Earth was a battlefield. That battlefield had created humans who could survive anything, but the galaxy saw that strength and called it primitive violence. Marcus finished recording Pete Nguyen's death and moved deeper into the tunnel. There were 8 more bodies to find, 8 more families to notify, 8 more reasons why his research into human capabilities was becoming less academic and more personal. Back in the council chambers, Sarah was listening to the Valdorians complain about human soldiers. Captain Elena Vasquez had just saved 3 Valdorian trade ships from space pirates. She had lost 15 good Marines in the fight. "The human warriors are too aggressive," Glubmore was saying. "They solved the problem with violence instead of negotiation. Surely peaceful beings could have found a better way." Sarah knew the truth. The pirates had been torturing captured crews for fun. Negotiation was not an option. Captain Vasquez had made the hard choice to save lives, and now she was being criticized for it. "Perhaps," Sarah said slowly, You would prefer to handle pirate attacks without human assistance? The council chamber went quiet. Everyone knew that human marines were the only force that could stop the raiders who attacked the outer systems. But no one wanted to admit it. The Deathworlders serve their purpose, Zix-9 said finally. But they must learn to follow proper procedures. Sarah made another note on her tablet. Around the galaxy, she knew other humans were making similar notes. Every insult, every dismissal, every time they were treated like property instead of people. On the mining world, Marcus was helping load the last body onto the transport ship. Tom Harrison stood beside him, watching the ship disappear into the dark sky. "Doc," Tom said, "how long are we going to take this?" Marcus looked at the man's face. Tom had worked these mines for 12 years. His hands were scarred from the dangerous equipment. His lungs were damaged from breathing toxic dust. His family lived in a small metal building with thin walls and recycled air. "I don't know," Marcus said honestly, "but I'm starting to think our patience isn't a virtue anymore." "It's becoming a weakness," Tom nodded slowly. Around them, other miners were having quiet conversations. Word of the council's decision was spreading through the human networks. No better safety equipment, no changes to the dangerous procedures, no recognition that human lives had value. Sarah's meeting ended with the usual dismissal. The aliens filed out of the chamber, talking among themselves in their native languages. None of them looked at her or said goodbye. To them, she was furniture that occasionally made sounds. Sarah walked to her small apartment in the diplomatic quarter. The walls were gray metal like everything else in the alien space station. She had one window that looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were working, fighting, and dying for species that saw them as useful animals. She activated her private communication system and sent a simple message to Dr. Webb and Captain Vasquez. Council meeting notes attached. Situation unchanged. It was code. It meant the aliens were still treating humans like property. It meant nothing was going to change through normal diplomatic channels. It meant maybe it was time to consider other options. Sarah sat by her window and looked at the stars. Each point of light represented a world where humans were building, protecting, or serving aliens who despised them. How long could this continue? How many more Petanguyans would die in unsafe mines? How many more Marines would sacrifice themselves for people who called them monsters? She thought about her grandmother's stories again. About how humans had learned to work together when they faced extinction. About how the strongest species was not always the one with the biggest claws, but the one that never gave up. Maybe it was time for the galaxy to remember what made Deathworlders dangerous. Maybe it was time to stop being so patient and kind. Sarah turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring another day of alien contempt and human endurance. But something was changing in the human networks. Something quiet and careful and very, very patient. The Deathworlders were starting to remember who they really were. 3 months after the mining disaster on Kepler 442b, the galaxy gave humans 3 more reasons to question their place in civilized space. The first crisis began on New Eden, a world where human farmers had spent 30 years turning poisonous soil into fertile land. The work had been brutal. Humans had died from toxic exposure, equipment failures, and attacks by native predators that looked like giant centipedes with acid spit. But they had succeeded. New Eden now produced food for 12 star systems. Human families lived in small towns scattered across the green fields. Children played in parks that had once been deadly swampland. It was proof that humans could build something beautiful, not just survive something terrible. Then the climate changed. Solar flares from the local star disrupted weather patterns across the planet. Crops began dying in some regions while floods destroyed others. The human farmers knew how to adapt. They had survived worse conditions on Earth and dozens of other worlds. The Galactic Council had different ideas. The most fertile regions must be preserved for important populations, announced Councillor Zix-9 during an emergency session. The Valdorian agricultural specialists and Chitauri breeding colonies will be relocated to the safe zones. The Deathworlders can return to the damaged areas. Sarah Chen sat in her metal chair and watched the vote. Every alien council member raised their appendage in agreement. Not one asked what would happen to the human families already living in those safe zones. "Counselor," Sarah said when the vote ended, "those regions are home to over 200,000 humans. Where are they supposed to go?" The crystal being's light pulsed with impatience. "Deathworlders are adaptable. They will survive the climate disruption better than civilized species. The terraforming zones are still toxic, Sarah pressed. Children and elderly humans will die from exposure. Then they should have evolved better, clicked clickback from the Chitauri delegation. Natural selection is efficient. Sarah's hands remained still on the table, but her jaw muscles tightened. Around the galaxy, other humans were receiving similar news. Families given 48 hours to pack their lives and move to regions that could kill them. The second crisis came 2 weeks later on the pleasure world Valdorian Prime. Captain Elena Vasquez led her Marine regiment down from orbit to respond to a distress call. Pirates had taken control of 3 resort cities and were holding thousands of alien tourists hostage. The planet's security forces were decorative at best. The Valdorians had never faced real violence on their paradise world. Their police carried weapons that delivered mild electric shocks. Against pirates with military-grade equipment, they might as well have been throwing flowers. Elena's Marines went in hard and fast. They cleared building after building, saving hostages and eliminating threats. The fighting was close quarters and brutal. Pirates had booby-trapped the resort hotels and were using civilians as human shields. Sergeant Mike Torres died when he threw himself on a grenade to save a group of Valdorian children. Corporal Lisa Chang bled out in a hotel lobby after taking sniper fire meant for fleeing tourists. Private David Kim burned to death when pirates ignited a fuel depot he was trying to secure. 47 humans died saving lives on a world where they were not welcome as anything but hired muscle. 312 pirates were eliminated. Over 2,000 alien civilians went home safely to their families. The victory celebration took place in the Grand Palace, while Elena's surviving Marines cleaned their weapons and counted their dead. Valdorian nobles in expensive clothing made speeches about their resilience in the face of adversity. They congratulated each other on their survival. Elena stood at the edge of the celebration with her lieutenant, watching the aliens drink expensive wine and laugh about their adventure. She held the dog tags of her dead soldiers in her pocket. "Listen to them," whispered Lieutenant Jake Morrison. His arm was in a sling from shrapnel wounds. The nobles were discussing humans like they discussed their pet aquatic mammals. "Wonderfully vicious creatures," one noble was saying. "Perfect for this sort of unpleasant work." Another noble nodded enthusiastically. "We should consider breeding programs. Select the most aggressive specimens and encourage reproduction. Think of the tactical possibilities. The trick is keeping them loyal," added a third. "Like any dangerous animal, they need firm training from birth." Elena's grip tightened on the dog tags. These aliens were planning to breed humans like attack dogs, while her soldiers lay dead in the medical bay. The third crisis struck Dr. Marcus Webb's research laboratory on Kepler Station. His team had been studying human neurological adaptation for 5 years. They had discovered something remarkable. Humans could process quantum fluctuations unconsciously. The skill had evolved from navigating Earth's chaotic magnetic field, which shifted constantly due to solar storms and geological activity. While other species needed computers to detect quantum changes, humans could feel them naturally. This ability made faster-than-light communication possible. Instead of sending messages through hyperspace relays that took days to cross the galaxy, information could be transmitted instantaneously through quantum entanglement, networks that human brains could monitor and control. It was the greatest breakthrough in galactic communication since the invention of hyperspace. It would revolutionize trade, diplomacy, and scientific research. And it could only work with human operators. Marcus spent months preparing his presentation to the Chitauri Science Authority. He documented every experiment, every test result, every application of the technology. His team worked 18-hour days to perfect the demonstration. The presentation lasted 45 minutes. The Chitauri scientists listened with apparent interest, asked technical questions, and requested copies of all research data. Marcus thought he had finally proven that humans could contribute more than manual labor to galactic civilization. 3 weeks later, the Chitauri Science Authority announced their groundbreaking discovery of quantum biological communication networks. They published papers describing the technology as a product of advanced Chitauri research. Human involvement was mentioned only as subject testing with primitive neural specimens. Marcus watched the news broadcast in his empty laboratory. His research had been stolen, his team's work credited to aliens who had contributed nothing. and humans were once again described as primitive test subjects rather than intelligent scientists. The message was clear across all three crises. Humans could die for alien comfort, sacrifice their homes for alien convenience, and create revolutionary technology for alien glory, but they would never be treated as equals. They would always be useful animals who existed for alien benefit. Sarah received reports from across the galaxy. On New Eden, human families were dying from toxic exposure in the terraforming zones. Children were developing lung diseases. Elderly humans were collapsing from chemical poisoning. The death toll was climbing every day, but the aliens in the safe zones were comfortable. Captain Vasquez's after-action report was clinical and professional. It listed casualties, tactical decisions, and mission outcomes. It did not mention the Noble's conversation about breeding programs or the celebration that ignored human sacrifice. But Sarah could read between the lines. Dr. Webb's communication was brief. Research completed. Results appropriated. Recognition denied. Continuing other projects. Sarah knew what that meant. Marcus was brilliant, patient, and methodical. If he was working on other projects, they were probably not academic in nature. Similar messages arrived from human communities across the galaxy. Miners reporting equipment failures that aliens refused to repair. Soldiers describing missions where they were treated as expendable shock troops. Engineers whose innovations were credited to alien supervisors. Teachers whose human students were denied access to advanced education. The pattern was everywhere. Humans created, protected, and served while aliens took credit, comfort, and control. And it was getting worse. Sarah began noticing changes in human behavior during diplomatic meetings. Humans still performed their duties with professional efficiency, but something was different. They stopped making small talk with alien colleagues. They answered questions with minimum necessary words. They no longer offered suggestions or improvements to alien procedures. Most telling of all, they stopped smiling. The change was subtle but universal. Every human Sarah encountered had the same expression: polite, competent, and completely cold. They looked at aliens the way a wolf looks at sheep, patient, calculating, and waiting. Sarah realized that something was spreading through the human networks, not rebellion or violence, but a quiet understanding that the social contract had been broken. Humans had tried for 50 years to earn respect through service, sacrifice, and patience. The galaxy's response had been contempt, exploitation, and cruelty. Maybe it was time for a different approach. Sarah opened her secure communication system and composed a message to key humans across the galaxy. Assessment complete. Current diplomatic strategies ineffective. Recommend consideration of alternative approaches. Please advise on resource availability and coordination capabilities. It was diplomatic language, but every human would understand the real meaning. How far are we willing to go, and what do we have to work with? The responses came quickly. Captain Vasquez reported on human military assets. Dr. Webb provided data on critical infrastructure dependencies. Colony administrators detailed resource stockpiles and strategic positions. Miners described structural vulnerabilities in alien habitats. Sarah read each report and felt something cold settle in her chest. The humans had been busy during their 50 years of service. They knew every weakness in galactic civilization. They understood every critical system that kept the alien worlds running, and they had access to all of it. The Deathworlders were remembering what they were capable of when kindness stopped working. Share. The silence began on a Tuesday. Across the galaxy, humans stopped talking to aliens unless directly asked a question. They continued their work with mechanical precision. But the casual conversations, helpful suggestions, and friendly interactions that had characterized human-alien relations for 50 years simply ended. On Zephyrian Station Alpha 7, engineer Tom Rodriguez had always greeted Supervisor Zix-14 with a smile and a cheerful, "Good morning." For 3 years, Tom had offered daily reports on system improvements, efficiency upgrades, and potential maintenance issues. On Tuesday, Tom walked past the supervisor's office without a word. When Zix-14 asked for the morning report, Tom handed over a datapad with minimum required information and returned to his duties. No suggestions. No improvements. No conversation. At first, Zix-14 was pleased. The Deathworlder has finally learned proper workplace behavior, the Crystal being told colleagues. No more primitive social chatter. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. Human miners stopped explaining better extraction techniques to alien overseers. Human soldiers ceased providing tactical advice to alien commanders. Human scientists quit sharing innovative ideas with alien research teams. The aliens noticed the change as improved discipline. They congratulated themselves on finally training their human workers to appropriate levels of subservience. They failed to notice that humans were talking to each other more than ever before. Sarah Chen discovered the network 3 weeks into the Great Silence. She was reviewing communication logs when she noticed irregular patterns in human data transmissions. Messages that looked like routine maintenance reports actually contained coded information about alien activities, resource distributions, and strategic vulnerabilities. The network was vast and sophisticated. Every human in the galaxy was connected through layers of encryption and misdirection that made the system invisible to alien monitoring. Miners shared geological data. Engineers exchanged infrastructure schematics. Soldiers provided tactical assessments. Scientists contributed technical specifications. Sarah realized she was looking at the most comprehensive intelligence network in galactic history, and it had been built under alien noses by the species they considered too primitive for complex thinking. Captain Elena Vasquez was training civilians on the agricultural world Kepler 186F when Sarah made contact through the network. The captain was teaching farming families basic combat techniques for protection against native predators. "The training is going well," Elena reported during their encrypted conversation. "Amazing how quickly people learn when they're properly motivated." Sarah understood the subtext. Human civilians were learning military skills while aliens assumed they were just dealing with local wildlife. The galaxy's most dangerous predators were teaching their children how to be even more dangerous. Dr. Marcus Webb was conducting different kinds of training on Research Station Omega-12. His routine equipment maintenance sessions were actually teaching human technicians to identify critical failure points in alien life support systems, navigation computers, and communication arrays. "My students are very dedicated," Marcus told Sarah through the network. "They want to understand every detail of how these systems work, and more importantly, how they stop working." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. Marcus wasn't just mapping alien technology. He was teaching humans how to disable it precisely and efficiently. The network revealed other developments that surprised even Sarah. On mining world Delta 9, humans had been quietly stockpiling rare elements needed for advanced weapons and hyperspace drives. The aliens assumed the materials were being processed for normal industrial use. Human merchants throughout the galaxy had been purchasing seemingly random items: communication equipment, medical supplies, emergency rations, and portable power sources. Individually, the purchases looked routine. Together, they formed a comprehensive logistics network, capable of supporting independent human operations across multiple star systems. Most disturbing of all, human agricultural specialists had been developing crop varieties that only human digestive systems could process. The aliens thought it was interesting biological research. In reality, humans were creating food security that excluded every other galactic species. Sarah began to understand the scope of what was happening. Humans weren't just preparing for resistance. They were building the infrastructure for independence. Complete total independence from galactic civilization. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. A young human girl named Lisa Park on the colony world Tau Ceti Prime. Lisa was 8 years old and attended a mixed-species school with alien children. She was bright, curious, and helpful in the way that human children often were. Her teachers considered her a model student who demonstrated that Deathworlder offspring could be properly civilized. Lisa was also a perfect spy. Children were ignored by alien security. They moved freely through restricted areas, overheard classified conversations, and observed sensitive activities without attracting attention. Lisa and thousands of other human children had been unconsciously gathering intelligence for months. "The Crystal people are worried," Lisa reported to her parents through the network. "I heard teacher Zix-22 talking to the principal about production problems. They say the death worker humans aren't being helpful anymore." Her parents smiled and encouraged Lisa to keep listening and learning. They praised her for being observant and curious. They never directly asked her to spy, but they made it clear that information about alien activities was important to share with family. Similar conversations happened in human homes across the galaxy. Children learned that knowledge was power, that patience was strategy, and that sometimes the most dangerous weapon was the ability to appear harmless. Sarah realized that humans had been unconsciously preparing for this moment since first contact. Every generation of human children had grown up in an environment where they needed to understand alien behavior to survive. They had developed an instinctive ability to read alien emotions, predict alien reactions, and identify alien weaknesses. The aliens, meanwhile, had become completely dependent on human labor without realizing it. They had delegated so many critical functions to expendable Deathworlders that their own civilizations could barely function without human support. Space stations needed human engineers to maintain life support systems that alien designers had made unnecessarily complex. Alien technology required human technicians who understood both advanced theory and practical problem-solving. Military operations depended on human soldiers who could adapt to chaotic combat situations that left other species paralyzed with indecision. Most critically, galactic food production relied almost entirely on human agricultural expertise. Other species had evolved on worlds with stable climates and abundant resources. They had never learned to coax life from hostile soil or adapt crops to changing conditions. Humans had been doing both for millennia. The network data painted a clear picture. If humans withdrew their cooperation simultaneously across the galaxy, alien civilization would collapse within weeks. And humans now had the coordination capability to make that withdrawal happen. Sarah opened a secure channel to key human leaders throughout the galaxy. The message was simple: assessment complete. Capabilities confirmed. Recommend final consultation before implementation. Timeline suggestions? Captain Vasquez responded first. Military assets ready. Civilian populations prepared. Recommend coordination with infrastructure specialists. Dr. Webb's reply was characteristically precise. Critical systems mapped. Failure cascade models complete. Optimal timing would be during shift change cycles for maximum effect. Similar confirmations arrived from human communities on dozens of worlds. Agricultural coordinators reported crop rotation schedules. Mining supervisors provided extraction shutdown procedures. Transportation specialists detailed shipping route disruptions. Sarah looked at the data and realized that humans were no longer planning resistance. They were orchestrating the controlled demolition of a galactic civilization that had treated them as disposable tools for half a century. The final message came from an unexpected source. A human child on a Chitauri research station who had overheard scientists discussing a final solution to the Deathworlder problem. The aliens were planning to replace human workers with artificially grown biological constructs that would be easier to control. Sarah stared at the intelligence report and felt something cold and final settle in her chest. The aliens weren't just exploiting humans anymore. They were planning to eliminate them entirely. She composed one last message to the network. Timeline accelerated. Implementation begins at 0-hour Galactic Standard Time. Confirm readiness, and other responses came back within minutes. Hundreds of confirmations from every corner of human space. Engineers ready to shut down critical systems. Soldiers prepared to withdraw protection from vulnerable alien populations. Agricultural specialists standing by to halt food production. After 50 years of patience, kindness, and service, the Deathworlders were about to remind the galaxy why Earth had been classified as a forbidden world before humans learned to leave it. The silence was ending. What came next would be much, much louder. 0 hour came on a quiet Thursday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Engineer Tom Rodriguez walked into his shift at Zephyrian Station Alpha 7 exactly as he had every day for 3 years. He checked his equipment, reviewed the duty roster, and began his rounds through the station's critical systems. Everything appeared normal. At 800 hours, Tom shut down the primary life support processor for routine maintenance. At 0815, he disabled the backup atmospheric recycling system for scheduled repairs. By 0830, the station's environmental controls had failed completely, and crystal beings who had never breathed unfiltered air began experiencing respiratory distress. Supervisor Zix-14 rushed to the engineering section to find Tom, calmly packing his tools into a storage container. The systems are failing. Zix-14's light pulsed with panic. You must repair them immediately. Tom looked at the supervisor with calm, empty eyes. I am no longer employed by this station. My services are being withdrawn due to breach of contract. What contract? Zix-14's crystalline form flickered with confusion. You are property of the Zephyrian Colonial Authority. No, Tom said quietly. I am a citizen of the Terran Federation. We are exercising our right to terminate all agreements with species that have violated the Galactic Geneva Convention regarding treatment of sentient beings. Tom sealed his toolkit and walked toward the docking bay, where a human transport ship was waiting. Behind him, emergency alarms began wailing as the station's life support continued to deteriorate. Similar scenes played out simultaneously across hundreds of worlds. Human engineers shut down power grids, communications arrays, and environmental systems. Human agricultural specialists halted food production and activated plant diseases that would destroy alien crops. Human merchants recalled their ships and froze all trade agreements. Most significantly, human military forces withdrew from their protective positions around vulnerable alien colonies. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of her battlecruiser Indomitable as her ships pulled away from the Valdorian system. For 5 years, her fleet had patrolled the trade routes, protecting merchant vessels from pirate attacks and territorial disputes. Captain, reported Lieutenant Morrison, we're receiving distress calls from 17 different ships. They're requesting immediate assistance. Elena studied the tactical display. Pirate fleets that had been hiding in asteroid fields and dead systems were already moving toward the unprotected trade routes. Without human military presence, the aliens were defenseless against raiders who specialized in violence. Log all distress calls as received but unactionable due to withdrawal of Terran Federation protection services, Elena ordered. Set course for Kepler 442b. It's time to collect our miners. On New Eden, human families who had been forced into toxic terraforming zones began their evacuation. But they didn't leave quietly. Agricultural specialist Dr. Sarah Kim activated a biological weapon she had been developing in secret, a virus that would destroy every crop variety that sustained alien populations while leaving human food sources untouched. The soil contamination will spread across the entire planet within 6 months, she explained to the human evacuation coordinator. The aliens will have to choose between starvation and abandoning the world entirely. Similar biological warfare was beginning on dozens of agricultural worlds. Humans had spent decades learning to make hostile environments livable. Now they were using that knowledge in reverse, making livable environments deadly for everyone except humans. Dr. Marcus Webb was coordinating the most complex part of the operation from his research station. His other projects had involved mapping every critical system in galactic civilization and calculating exactly how to shut them down with minimum effort and maximum effect. The cascade failure is proceeding ahead of schedule, he reported to Sarah Chen through the secure network. Zephyrian stations are losing life support. Valdorian worlds are losing food production. Chitauri colonies are losing power generation. Marcus had discovered that alien civilizations were remarkably fragile once humans stopped maintaining them. Species that had evolved on safe, stable worlds had never learned to build robust systems that could survive unexpected failures. How long until they realize this isn't random equipment failure? Sarah asked. Based on their response patterns, I estimate 6 to 12 hours, Marcus replied. They're still trying to solve the problems with standard repair procedures. They haven't grasped that this is coordinated withdrawal of human cooperation. The realization began hitting alien leadership as emergency reports flooded in from across the galaxy. On the council station, emergency sessions were called as crisis after crisis demanded immediate attention. Counselor Zix-9 stood before a holographic display showing failing systems on 47 different worlds. The Deathworlder equipment is malfunctioning simultaneously across multiple sectors. This cannot be coincidental. Clickvack's mandibles clicked nervously. Our Chitauri colonies have lost primary power on 15 worlds. The human technicians claim their contracts have been terminated, but we never agreed to any terminations. Glubmore's aquatic suit bubbled with agitation. Pirate fleets are attacking our trade convoys. Where are the human naval forces? They are supposed to protect our shipping lanes. The truth dawned slowly. The humans weren't just experiencing technical difficulties. They were actively sabotaging alien civilization. Bring me Ambassador Chen immediately, Zix-9 commanded, but Sarah Chen was no longer in her diplomatic quarters. She was aboard the Terran Federation flagship Endeavor, watching the coordinated withdrawal of human cooperation from a secure command center. Status report, she requested from the operation coordinators. Life support failures, affecting 63 stations and colonies, reported the engineering coordinator. Estimated 48 hours until critical life. Support failure on major population centers. Food production halted on agricultural worlds supporting 22 alien species, added the agricultural coordinator. Biological warfare initiated on 17 worlds. Estimated crop failure within 30 to 90 days. Military withdrawal complete from protected zones, Captain Vasquez announced. Pirate activity increasing exponentially. Alien naval forces proving inadequate for system defense. Sarah nodded grimly. The operation was proceeding faster than anticipated. Alien civilizations were more dependent on human support than even the humans had realized. Incoming communication from the Galactic Council, reported the communications officer. Sarah smiled coldly. Put them through. Counselor Zix-9's crystalline form appeared on the main screen, flickering with desperate light. Ambassador Chen, you must order your people to return to their duties immediately. Critical systems are failing across the galaxy. I am no longer Ambassador Chen, Sarah replied calmly. I am Admiral Chen of the Terran Federation Defense Force, and my people are not returning to anything. This is an act of war. Clickvac screeched through the communication link. No, Sarah said quietly. This is an act of independence. For 50 years, you have treated humans as expendable property. You have stolen our innovations, sacrificed our soldiers, and planned our extinction. We are simply withdrawing our consent to be your slaves. Your people will die without galactic support. Glubmore gurgled frantically. Sarah's expression didn't change. Counselor, we are from Earth. We survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, plagues, and predators that would give you nightmares. We survived all of that before we ever met you. We will survive long after your civilization's collapse. The alien counselors fell silent as the implications sank in. Humans didn't need galactic civilization. Galactic civilization needed humans. What do you want? Zix-9 asked finally. Full recognition of human rights and sovereignty, Sarah replied. Immediate cessation of exploitation and discrimination. Reparations for 50 years of stolen labor and stolen lives. And guarantee that no species in this galaxy will ever again be treated the way you have treated us. Impossible. Clickvac clicked. The Galactic Order cannot. Sarah cut the transmission. Around the galaxy, the consequences of human withdrawal were becoming catastrophic. Space stations were losing life support. Colony worlds were losing power. Agricultural systems were collapsing. Trade routes were becoming pirate hunting grounds. But the most devastating effect was psychological. For 50 years, aliens had convinced themselves that they were superior to the violent Deathworlders from the Forbidden World. Now they were discovering that their entire civilization had been built on the backs of the species they had looked down upon. On Valdorian Prime, panic was spreading as the beautiful resort world lost its food imports and protective naval patrols. The aquatic beings who had mocked human aggression were now begging for human marines to return and protect them from raiders. On Chitauri research stations, scientists who had stolen human innovations found themselves unable to maintain the technology they had claimed to invent. Without human technicians to keep the systems running, their advanced laboratories became expensive scrap metal. On Zephyrian colonies, crystal beings who had dismissed human intelligence were dying from environmental failures that they couldn't solve without human engineers. The galaxy was learning the difference between a species that chose to serve and a species that could be forced to serve. Humans had always been the former, but the aliens had mistaken them for the latter. Now the Deathworlders were reminding everyone why Earth had been classified as too dangerous to visit. It wasn't because the planet was hostile to alien life. It was because the planet had created something far more dangerous than any predator or natural disaster. It had created humans. And humans, when they stopped being kind, were the most terrifying force in the galaxy. 6 months after the Great Withdrawal, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in a very different council chamber. The new meeting room was aboard Humanity Station, a massive structure built in the neutral zone between human and alien space. Unlike the cold metal chambers where humans had once begged for basic rights, this room was designed for equals. The table was round with no elevated positions or positions of subordination. Counselor Zix-9 sat across from Sarah, the crystal being's light dim with exhaustion. The Zephyrian colonies had lost 60% of their population to life support failures and pirate attacks. Only emergency intervention by human rescue teams had prevented complete extinction. Clickvac's mandibles clicked nervously as the insectoid being reviewed casualty reports. The Chitauri research empire had collapsed when their stolen technology failed without human maintenance. Their vaunted intelligence meant nothing when they couldn't keep their own inventions operational. Glubmore's aquatic suit showed stress fractures from rapid evacuation procedures. The Valdorian paradise worlds had been ravaged by raiders and food shortages. Beautiful resort planets had become refugee camps as aquatic beings fled dying colonies. The terms are non-negotiable, Sarah said, sliding a data tablet across the table. Full recognition of human sovereignty, reparations for 50 years of exploitation, and guaranteed rights for all sentient species in the galaxy. Zix-9's light flickered weakly. The reparations you demand would bankrupt half the galaxy. The labor you stole from us built half the galaxy, Sarah replied calmly.
You're simply paying the bill that came due. The negotiations had been going on for weeks.
Every day the aliens delayed, more of their colonies collapsed. Pirate fleets that had been held in check by human military forces were now carving up alien space like scavengers feeding on a corpse. The worst part for the aliens was that humans weren't being cruel. They were being efficient. Human rescue teams had evacuated alien civilians from failing colonies, but only after the local governments agreed to new citizenship rights for all humans in their territories. Human engineers had restored critical life support systems, but only after receiving payment and contracts guaranteeing fair treatment for human workers. Human agricultural specialists had ended. The crop plagues on worlds where alien leadership agreed to land, redistribution and worker protection laws. Human military forces had resumed protection duties for alien colonies that signed mutual defense treaties recognizing human territorial rights. The galaxy was being rebuilt, but this time humans were partners rather than property. The Terran Federation has proven its point, Glubmore gurgled through his damaged suit. Your people are clearly superior in technical and military capabilities. But surely you don't intend to dominate the galaxy through force? Sarah smiled, and the expression was genuinely warm for the first time in months. Counselor, we never wanted to dominate anyone. We just wanted to be treated as equals instead of animals. She gestured to the viewing port, where alien and human ships were working together to construct new trade stations. Look around you. When humans and aliens cooperate as partners, we accomplish incredible things. When you treat us as slaves, everything falls apart. Dr. Marcus Webb entered the chamber carrying a data pad filled with reconstruction plans. The xenobiologist had spent the last 6 months coordinating the rebuilding of galactic infrastructure, but this time with human-designed safety systems and fail-safes. The agricultural restoration is ahead of schedule, he reported to Sarah. Crop yields on recovered worlds are actually higher than before the withdrawal. It turns out that when humans are allowed to implement their farming techniques properly, instead of just following alien orders, productivity increases dramatically. Captain Elena Vasquez joined them with her own report. Pirate activity in the outer systems has dropped by 80%. The joint human-alien patrol fleets are much more effective than either species operating alone. The aliens listened to these reports with mixed emotions, relief that their civilizations were recovering, but also embarrassment at how much better things worked when they treated humans as equals instead of tools. There is one more item to address, Sarah said, producing another data tablet. The children. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. During the withdrawal, human families had been evacuated from alien worlds. Now there were millions of human children growing up in Terran Federation space, learning about the galaxy from a very different perspective than their parents had. The young humans must be taught to cooperate with galactic civilization, Zix-9 said carefully. Surely you don't intend to raise a generation that sees aliens as enemies. Sarah's expression became very serious. We're raising a generation that will never forget what happened to their parents and grandparents, but we're also raising them to be better than us. She activated the data pad, showing images from human schools throughout Terran space. Children of multiple species were learning together. But the curriculum was different from traditional galactic education. Human children learn about the galaxy's history, including the 50 years of exploitation their people endured, but they also learn about alien cultures, languages, and scientific achievements. They're taught to cooperate and build bridges. The images showed human children working alongside young Zephyrians, Valdorians, and Chitauri who had been born in Terran space or whose families had sought refuge during the collapse. But most importantly, Sarah continued, they're taught to recognize the difference between cooperation and exploitation. They'll work with anyone who treats them as equals, but they'll never again serve anyone who treats them as property. Young Lisa Park appeared on one of the screens, now 9 years old and serving as a student ambassador between human and alien children in her school. She was teaching a group of Chitauri youngsters how to play a human game called Capture the Flag while simultaneously learning their mathematical notation system. The children adapt quickly, observed Clickvac. Perhaps the next generation will be able to build better relationships than our generation managed. Perhaps, Sarah agreed. But that depends entirely on how you treat them. Children learn from experience, not just words. The formal treaty signing took place 3 hours later. The document was called the Terran Accords, and it established the legal framework for the new galactic civilization. Humans were recognized as a sovereign species with full rights and territorial claims. The Terran Federation became an equal member of the galactic community, with veto power over policies affecting Deathworlder populations. Most importantly, the Accords established universal rights for all sentient species, preventing any group from being treated as property again. As the alien counselors signed the treaty, Sarah thought about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. 50 years of patience, service, and sacrifice, months of careful planning and coordinated resistance, and now finally recognition and respect. But she also thought about the cost. Thousands of humans had died in unsafe mines, hopeless battles, and toxic environments during the years of exploitation. Entire generations had grown up believing they were second-class beings in a galaxy that saw them as useful animals. "Admiral," asked a young human officer, "what should we tell the colonies about returning to normal operations?" Sarah looked out at the stars through the viewing port. Human ships were already returning to their duties throughout the galaxy, but this time as equal partners in galactic civilization rather than expendable workers. "Tell them that normal operations never existed before," she said. "What we're building now is something new. Something better." The officer nodded and departed to relay the message. Sarah remained at the viewing port, watching human and alien crews work together to construct a new deep space communications array. Dr. Webb joined her at the window. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. "The cooperation, I mean. Or will they eventually forget the lessons and start treating humans as property again?" Sarah smiled, but it was a cold expression that reminded everyone present why humans were called Deathworlders. "Marcus, we've taught an entire generation of human children exactly what happens when people mistake our kindness for weakness. If the aliens ever forget those lessons, our children will remind them, and our children's children will remind their children." She turned to face the alien counselors who were preparing to depart for their homeworlds. "The galaxy has learned to appreciate the difference between a predator that hunts and a guardian that protects. As long as you remember that distinction, we'll continue to be your guardians. But if you ever again mistake human kindness for human weakness..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The aliens understood perfectly. They had experienced what humans were capable of when they stopped being patient and kind. None of them ever wanted to experience it again. As the alien delegates departed, Sarah remained at the viewing port with her senior staff. The galaxy was healing, rebuilding, and learning to function as a community of equals rather than a hierarchy of exploitation. But in human space, children were learning history lessons that would ensure the Great Withdrawal was never forgotten. They were growing up strong, confident, and absolutely clear about the difference between cooperation and servitude. The Deathworlders had stopped being kind just long enough to teach the galaxy respect. Now they were ready to be kind again, but from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. And everyone in the galaxy understood that human kindness was a gift that could be withdrawn at any time. The choice has always remained theirs.